So in this video, I will be discussing 8 things that you might want to consider before buying a speedlight or a strobe for flash photography. Hi guys, this is Jiggie, a portrait and wedding photographer from the Philippines, and welcome to the channel. So in today's video, as I said earlier, I will be discussing 8 things that you need to consider when buying a strobe or a speedlight for flash photography. Though I have to make it clear from the very beginning that this video is not about recommending which flash you're supposed to buy, but rather I want you to consider all these things that I will be talking about now in order to guide you in terms of the flash that you're supposed to purchase. All right, so let's get going. Okay, so the first thing that you ask yourself is, what will you be shooting? So that actually ties into the type of photographer you are. If you're an events photographer or a wedding photographer, so most likely you need something small and lightweight because you're always on the go and running and shooting. Or are you a studio photographer and portrait photographer that normally you just shoot indoor? So basically you don't need the portability, but you might really need the power more. Or do you want to have both? Meaning, do you want to have a strong flash that's capable of shooting indoor and outdoor, but might not be as portable as a smaller speedlight? So that's your base point. That's where you should be starting. You ask yourself first, what are you going to be using it for? Because there's so many kinds of flash units out there. I will give you some examples. This is your speedlight. It's small. It's very versatile. You could bring it anywhere, though it lacks power. Then you have your Studio Strobes, which basically are just very powerful lights, but aren't really that portable because they need to be plugged in for it to be able to work. And at the same time, you also have battery-powered Studio Strobes. So this one is basically this that you could bring outdoor. The next thing you have to ask yourself, do you need the flash to be battery-powered or not? So if you need it to be battery-powered, obviously your choices are just these two. But if you don't need battery power, then you could go with a standard Studio Strobe. So what's the advantage of a standard Studio Strobe? Well, number one, it could be more powerful. You can get the 1,200 watts that aren't usually available in a very affordable price range for battery powered ones. Number two, the recycle speed is normally faster, and they're just generally cheaper than battery powered Studio Strobes. Okay, but if you want the flexibility of being able to go outside and not being dependent on plug-in power, then you might want to consider the battery-powered flash units. Obviously, the advantages of these battery-powered flash units is that you can take them anywhere and basically you have more flexibility. Then if that's the case, then you have to choose now between a speedlight or you want to go with a portable Studio Strobe. So there's so many options out there for you to choose from. I am not going to be recommending a specific brand for you to choose, but basically use this as a basis of basically asking yourself what you are going to be needing. So the next thing that you have to consider is how much power do you actually need. Some people say that, oh, I want the most powerful flash because I want to be able to control the sun. I want to be able to do this and that. Now, again, it's not all about power. It is about how you're going to be using it. Let's say, for example, you're a wedding photographer that usually shoots indoor and you're shooting at night. You don't want to be lugging around this big, hefty 500-watt flash that when you're shooting at night is really too powerful already that you can't even stop it down to bring it to the exposure level that you want. That's why you might want to consider just a weaker flash. But then if you see yourself shooting outdoor most of the time, then you might want to consider the stronger flash. And if you're shooting in the studio and you really need that much power, like 1,200 watts, then again, go for your standard Studio Strobes that you can plug in. Do you want it to have the capabilities of wireless control, or are you okay with just standard triggering? So what do I mean by that? You have two types of triggers. This is an ordinary trigger, which is basically just a trigger and a receiver that you can connect to the Studio Strobes. Oh, sorry, this is the receiver. You connect it to the Studio Strobe via cable. You put this one on top of your camera and it just triggers your flash. So the downside of that one is that whenever you need to make your flash weaker, you actually have to physically go to the flash and make the flash weaker. Now, another option that you have are something similar to this one, that you can remotely control everything that is in your flash. So from here, which is going to be on top of my camera, I can just control the power of my flash, I can control the modes of my flash, and basically it just seems as if my flash is on top of my camera. These flash units also come with that. These flash units have a built-in receiver, and all you have to do is put a trigger that's compatible with this flash unit, and you should be able to control everything already, meaning you can make it stronger or weaker. So which now brings us to the fifth thing that you have to consider. You have to ask yourself, do you want a flash that's capable of high-speed sync and TTL? What are those things? High-speed sync is basically allowing your flash to go beyond your flash sync speed. Now, if you want to research it, I'm sure there's so many videos out there in YouTube. Just type in flash sync speed versus high-speed sync in case you're not familiar with that. So the other option is TTL. So TTL means that it's through the lens metering. So what does that do? It makes your flash basically talk to your camera so that when they talk to each other, the camera tells your flash how much power it actually needs for the exposure that you've set in your camera. Now, TTL-enabled flash units and flash unit strobes or speedlights are generally more expensive, and so with TTL flash triggers. This one is a TTL flash trigger and allows high-speed sync for this particular model. There is another trigger specifically for this. This Studio Strobe is not capable of that. That's why you have to ask yourself, do you think you will be needing TTL or high-speed sync, or you're okay with just full manual control? And that is what this does. So again, that's one thing that you might have to consider whenever you're going to be buying your flash. So maybe at this point of the video, you have a general idea of the type of flash that you already want. And maybe some of you have started researching about particular brands that you might be interested in purchasing in the future. Which now comes to the sixth and the seventh things that you have to consider that I would suggest. The sixth one is consistency of the power and the color of your flash. So how do they test the consistency and color of the flash units? They normally have specialized devices like a light meter and a color reader, and they take test shots for every stop that they bring down their flash to. So it has to give a consistent flash or consistent reading every time it stops down or it stops up. And at the same time, the color shouldn't be shifting, because that is the downside of maybe some of the flash units out there that are very reasonably priced, that they are not really very consistent. The last thing that you would want is for your equipment not to give you what it is really meant to do or what it is meant to give. So again, with consistency and color, I would suggest doing your research more on the flash unit that you might be looking at in order for you to see the reviews or people experience or the experiences of other photographers when it comes to that. Now, the second to the last one, the seventh thing that you need to consider is warranty. Very, very, very important, especially local warranty where you're going to be purchasing. Because we have to consider the fact that these are not cheap investments and that you would want to be able to bring it somewhere in case something happens to it. Like for example, from my experience, since I am a professional wedding photographer, I tend to beat up a lot of my equipment. That's why I love using these flash units that come with 3-year warranties, so that if anything does happen to it, I can just bring it back to the shop, and then I applied for a professional service also, so that whenever I give it, they give me a replacement while my flash is being repaired. Now, usually for the hobbyist, it's not really too much of a problem, but again, it is your hard-earned money, so make sure that your local distributor offers a decent warranty to the flash unit that you're going to be buying, and at the same time, they are capable of repairing it in store, not having to send it out, because if they have to send it out and bring it back, it's going to take months for it to come back, and it might be an issue, especially if you're using the equipment for work. So last but not the least, the last thing you have to consider now is budget. So here's where it becomes very, very tricky, because you have to be able to ask yourself what is a want and what is a need. Therefore, you have to refer back to the first 7 things that we actually talked about, and then you ask yourself whether or not this is something that I'm going to be using in the future, or if you're doing it professionally, is it a feature that I actually need rather than just a want? And then if professionally wise, I'm speaking professionally wise, if this is what you really need but the budget doesn't allow you to get that, you might want to consider putting a bit of it, the ones that's over your budget, on a payment scheme in order for you to be able to save money in the future. Because if you buy something that's within your budget but not necessarily what you actually need, you will eventually have to buy whatever it is that you need again, and basically throwing away the initial investment that you already did. But again, the nice thing about technology nowadays is that there's so many brands out there, so many options of flash units that are relatively very, very affordable. So budget now is not as bad as how it was before when we were all starting in photography, where everything was just so expensive. So that's it. So to recap, basically, these are the 8 things that I suggest that you actually consider before purchasing your flash. The first is you ask yourself what you're going to be using it for. Secondly is how portable you want it to be. The third is how powerful. The fourth is, do you want it to have a built-in receiver so you can control it remotely, or manual triggering is fine. The fifth is whether or not you needed to have high-speed sync or TTL, because most high-speed sync triggers have TTL. The sixth is the consistency of color and the consistency of power. The seventh is your warranty, and eighth, of course, is budget. So I hope these 8 things guide you in terms of being able to properly decide what type of flash best suits your needs. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please do consider subscribing to the channel, and while you're at it, click that notification bell so that you get notified every time I upload a new video. And if you want to see some of my images, feel free to follow me on Instagram. It's at Jiggie Alejandrino. Okay, till the next video.